I think we're good to go then.
Yes, we are. We're on the air.
Good.
Yes, we
you.
are. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the September 15th Ordinance Committee meeting. And with that, we are going to take the roll call
Councilor McGee.
Here.
Councilor Katerina.
Here.
Council Hamel.
here.
Thank you.
We're going to begin by approving the minutes from the August 18th meeting. So Phil had the opportunity
So
to
moved.
read those. So for a second.
Councilor McGee.
Yes.
Councilor Katerina.
Yes.
Council Hamel.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I had a couple of small adjustments to the agenda, if I may. What I'd like to do I need a motion to do that, to change the agenda? You got to vote on it?
I'm looking down there at the parliamentarian.
Do we need to do that? No. we'll
Nah,
pass it back.
don't worry about it.
If my committee has a problem with it, they can call me out on it. We're gonna do two small changes. We've got a couple of ordinances that are ready for review and possible forwarding to the council for action. So one is the Shellfish Conservation Ordinance and the other is the Coastal Waters and Harbor Ordinance. So I'm gonna suggest we flip the order of those two. And then finally, I'm gonna add a new agenda item D that will be Jean Marie is going to update us on the ad hoc group meeting from yesterday with the Public Safety Division, including the caregivers at the Comfort Inn. So this is, an update on our discussion of the topic of homelessness and hopefully with some guidance we might have for this as an agenda item for next Wednesday's town council meeting. So with that, I'd like to invite Darren Granata to maybe join us here
Yep.
at a microphone or at the podium so we could walk us through the Coastal Waters and Harbor Ordinance. We want to thank Darren for his work. He's currently a fire marshal, state fire marshal, but his background includes former head of the Harbor Masters Association. So he has extensive experience in this space and he's been a huge help on both our Shellfish and also our Coastal Waters and Harbor committees. So he's done a lot of the work himself on helping us to revise and update these ordinances. So with that, Darren, I'm going to give you a chance to walk us through the Coastal Waters and Harbor changes, and then we can discuss the Shellfish after that. Thank you.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you. So it's chapter 1401. It's the Coastal Waters and Harbor Ordinance for the town of Scarborough. A lot of the information in there was obsolete. A lot of laws have changed. So when I got on the Coastal Waters Committee back in August of 2021, I looked at the ordinance and we amended it as such in the last year. So what we've done basically to the ordinance is that we've cleaned it up to the point that we've changed some numbering. We've identified some of the definitions we have changed to meet in-state law under Title 12. We actually created the houseboat definition. The state doesn't have a houseboat definition within the state of Maine. The state of Maine, the definition that is in there now has been vetted both by the Coastal Waters Committee here in Scarborough and some people from Submerged Lands and some people from the Maine Harbor Masters Association, which hopefully that definition is going to matriculate into state law at some point because the state is seeing a wide range of floating structures and floating homes that are not regulated. And the Maine Harbor Masters Association we're trying to get ahead of it, but so is Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and the Maine Submerged Lands Department. So I've worked very close with those departments to craft the houseboat ordinance or definition that is a bit wordy, but it has to really outline the area of a vessel with a 180-degree view and the Coast Guard standard to make sure that we don't have floating structures appear all over the state of Maine, which then we're gonna have to pick those up and clean them up later on in life. So we cleaned up a lot of the language, a lot of the definitions. We cleaned up the abandoned vessel definition. We cleaned up the watercraft definition to go in compliance with the state Title 12 definition. We changed some wording to traffic control authority to waterborne or water control authority because it's not real traffic. Traffic is has to do with Title 29A, which is a motor vehicle. So we kind of dressed that up. Headway speed, which was a basic speed law. We went back to the state law of headway speed is the minimal propulsion to maintain steering capability of a watercraft. So we went back to that and put that title, that definition back in there. And as I go through it, I'm just looking at the red edits that we made with the town clerk. A lot of it we left the same as far as section 3 and permits and suspensions and revocations. We left the same. Damage to harbor property, we left the same. We added some sections in tampering with boarding vessels without permission. We put a clause in there that the harbor master or their designee in an emergency can board a vessel at any time on a mooring. We've already done it on the fire department side, so I just don't want us to get into an issue where it's a legality, like, hey, you're on my boat. We put some wording in there. That way, if someone's boat is sinking or taking on water and have an emergency, we can go on and effectively deal with it accordingly, even if we can't get hold of them. Section 6, we changed some willful obstruction of facilities. Section 9, we added some wording about developed swim areas with buoys and lines and aids navigations, etc. Instead of just saying a town designated swimming area, we just tried to clean some verbiage up to make sure that we had it right. The minimum mooring requirements we've left alone. There was a discussion about eelgrass. We really don't have that issue in Scarborough right now because we have a sand bottom or a hard bottom. I'm sure there is eelgrass somewhere, but we didn't really address it at the present time because the federal navigation project where our moorings are is roughly all sand bottom at that point. So we really didn't want to start to muddy the waters with eelgrass issues. We talked about boat length, boat weight, mushroom size, block weights, chain sizes. We left all that the same. Nothing has really changed in that atmosphere. There's new technology out there for some of the mooring types and some of the anchors, but we left that stuff in there, not trying to changing a lot of that because a lot of stuff is existing. It's been there for years, and it really hasn't. That technology has not changed other than some of the bottom devices. So. We didn't change anything in sublettering of moorings. The waiting list has stayed the same. We didn't change the waiting list at all. We left that the same. We added some wording about abandoned watercraft. Again, there was some contradiction of abandoned vessels and abandoned this. So we went back to the state Title 12 definition of abandoned watercrafts so that in the event if something does somebody abandons a watercraft, we're able to go to the state's watercraft abandonment fund through main submerged lands and get money to do that. We just cleaning the language up. We added some of the verbiage from main submerged lands to that section about a class E crime and excluding some issues and showing what that does. We added some sections into the unseaworthiness vessel prohibited in a harbor, basically that the harbor master, his designee, can remove that vessel. And the issue was, we've had a few issues down there where people have brought a boat into the dock, they tie up to the dock, it's half sunk. Next thing you know, the town of Scarborough is going to be paying for it when it's sunk to the bottom on the dock, and we're just going to have an issue with our floats. And so we made it so that the harbor master, his designee, could basically take that boat, tow that boat out, if we had to, out onto the beach, set it aside, let the low tide go out, contract a company to get rid of it. We don't want to wreck the pier and the structure that we've invested millions of dollars in for the commercial fishing industry here. Let's see. We added some wording about sunken vessels inside the federal navigation project governed by the Army Corps of Engineers, because that wasn't in the sunken vessel section. We've added some wording there just to make sure that in that federal navigation project, we want to make sure there's certain wording. That's how we got the emergency dredge order to execute in April or May this year. And the town of Scarborough is on the list through the New England district to be fully dredged October of 2023. So we want to make sure that the project managers always ask for these issues and they want to know them. So we want to make sure the wording was in there right, that we're going to maintain our federal navigation project as our due diligence as the town entity. Once they,
So that's that dredging.
that is
Be
the
considered
the dr-
federal.
Correct.
Navigation
The
project.
dredging that occurred in the federal navigation project was just a navigable channel this year.
Okay,
That was an emergency dredge order
Yeah.
based on basically the silting of the channel. The next FNP project, full dredge, is the entire project from the pier out to the spit, up towards with the aquaculture lease agreements all the way out
Right.
front. So that's a fairly significant,
Right.
that won't be just 2 or 3 weeks. That's going to be probably,
this just clarifies.
it just clarifies it and cleans it up.
Yep.
The only other thing I think we added at the last meeting when we tried to finalize this was we put section 4 violations relating to peer use to be determined. And I don't know if you can see that. The verbiage that was put in that section was Tody added it late. Any person violating any section of this ordinance shall be subject to a fine not less than 100, not more than 500, plus the cost, which fine shall be recovered on complaint to the use of the town of Scarborough. Additional fines can be assessed, et cetera. So we had her add that. We did not really come to an agreement on the dollar amount of 100 or 500. We figured we would leave that up to the council. We just put numbers in there as placeholders.
Do you think those are fair placeholder numbers?
I think that we
'Cause
should be.
We don't know.
I personally think the first offense, the way that this will work, I think, and I can't speak for the harbor master,
Right.
but the first offense will be a warning.
Yeah.
The second offense, I think we should be at, 100, and the third offense, we should be well over $500.
Yeah,
And the example I will give you is religiously us in the fire department go down to that dock to go rescue somebody or tow a boat, and there is gear and traps and trash in front of the gate, and we can't get there and move through it. So
Yep.
the other caveat to this that's not in the ordinance that just came up the other night at the meeting on Tuesday night was the thought process would be adding anything left more than 24 hours is a violation of your peer use permit and can be removed by the town. Because most of the fishermen, and I'm not sure 24 is the best, 48 is maybe a little bit more reasonable, because the fishermen like to bring gear down, sit on the dock. They might leave it there one day. It might blow. They might not be able to get it out for a day or two, but in the city of Saco, they have it. Anything left more than 24 hours, we remove it, and then we make a violation as such. So that's something that else that's the only thing that's not in here that should be added. Anything left more than 48 hours can be removed by the harbor master or his designee if sees fit.
So that language is in here now.
no.
This language is in there in red, but the language about the 24-hour period is not.
Not here yet.
All right, so what I'd suggest on that, so I don't know, do you have anything further, Darren? That's a really good, concise run through of a lot of work that I know took several months of effort by the committee to grind through page by page, line by line. So we appreciate you leading that and driving it to this point. So at that point, I just want to ask for any questions. And if there are any suggestions for revisions, I'd say we could make those now and then leave any remaining ones for the next step if we feel this is ready to go forward to the council for. Go ahead.
So on the houseboat section, I just noticed you changed the definition around. So it says that the propulsion is the primary source and then the sleeping quarters are the secondary source. Is that a good summary?
It is. And the reason we did that is because what we've noticed I shouldn't say statewide, what we've noticed nationally is people will build a floating structure that has sleeping quarters with a 15 horsepower motor and try to call it a boat. So now we're trying to make a differentiation that it's a boat first with sleeping quarters secondary.
Okay, so if I'm looking at I guess what happens if somebody it's used primarily as a sleeping quarters and then like you said, they have a small motor on the back and calling it, what happens if it's actually the inverse of what your definition is?
Then it wouldn't qualify as a houseboat. It would be qualified as a floating structure.
Okay.
And the floating structure, we didn't want to go down the floating structure, down that definition because I'm sitting on a working group with IF&W and Submerged Lands to create that definition. So we didn't want to start putting words in our ordinance until we have a state definition of a floating structure.
And then who would oversee the governance of or enforcement of floating structures? Would that fall under?
It would still fall under our ordinance, but we give our harbor master the ability to do it. But we have to be careful with the floating structures as well, because we also have aquaculture lease sites. And so I've talked to Matt and a few of those guys that have the lease sites. I do not want to pigeonhole them in our ordinance to not be able to conduct commerce and make sure that they can properly aquaculture farm. So there is a difference of.
So, I mean, how far off do you think you are from the definition of the floating structure? And then would you be coming back to amend this again?
We probably won't, we won't have that definition, I'm guessing, till sometime in the spring. So at that point there, we would come back and just add that definition. And I think when the town clerk built that form, I think there's a placeholder for it. I'm not sure though.
Thank you. That's all I had right now.
Yeah, I say, so there are, I took a little new trip a couple weeks ago, but there are floating structures out there now that have oyster bags or whatever. They're, you know,
Spat bags, right?
Hassler and others have, you know, oyster farms. So there was one that was existing previously that was bought, on such oysters.
Right.
By a producer in Mid Coast. So those are out there now, and those are, you know, constitute the most of the floating structures that we have.
Right.
But I don't see any issue unless Darren does that of us moving forward what we have here with the possibility of there being additional revisions at a later date. I don't see a need to hold up the body, the bulk of the work. So, but I'm open to discussion and any other further questions. From you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I did want to point out to Council McGee that if you get down to Article 5, Section 10, there's a whole thing on houseboats too. That, you know, you can't just be floating around on a houseboat out there in the middle of the harbor. You've got certain things you've got to be doing. So I'm comfortable. Thank you for doing this work. These changes make sense to me. I know I'm just enough to be dangerous about this stuff. Because my family owns a Casco Bay Adventures. It's, my husband teaches Coast Guard licensing classes, so. But these make perfect sense to me, from what I know.
So can I take that as a motion for this to proceed, you know, to the next steps in bringing it
To
before
the council,
and any
yeah.
subsequent revisions that might take place between now and then or,
Yeah.
or post.
I'll make a motion to move it to the council.
Second,
Council McGee,
yes.
Council Caterina,
Yes,
Council Hamel,
Yes.
thank you.
Thanks, Darren. And while you're up there at the podium, I figured we would talk about Shellfish. Just as an intro, that similar work has been done in terms of updating the Shellfish Ordinance. Big improvements have been made to try to strengthen the requirements around surveys, which you know is an issue when we went through last year's cycle. So I'm pleased to say the survey activity and the conservation work is tighter in terms of how we've described that. And there is one part of this, however, that I think is going to need more discussion and more socialization. And that is the one pertaining to the resident commercial licenses. And there is a proposal to make it possible for current residential license holders to convert to a non-resident license. And it was raised, patterned after similar ordinances that were done in Brunswick and also in Freeport, I believe, where people were struggling with the cost of housing, and it was, they're finding, like a lot of other frontline employees, it's hard for folks to afford a house, you know, and be resident in the town where they are working. So I think that's going to require more socialization, but I thought we'd take a moment to run through the other key points, Darren, if you would, and then for us to decide, you know, perhaps to table this, you know, for another month or so to get, I'd like to have someone come back, like Robert Willett, for example, who's
oh, true.
he was
Yeah.
very knowledgeable and was one of the authors of this to kind of walk us through the rationale of that. Because I am afraid I cannot do it
Do
justice.
it justice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so as I said on the Shellfish Committee as well, there was a discussion about making some changes, and really the changes that were made were, again, more in line with putting stuff in line with state law. We changed some definitions, we changed some wording. We made sure that the importance of the survey was in there. we went through and we've changed the wording of the day licenses because the town clerk identified that there's a lot of people that want day licenses. We gave them the ability, hopefully, to automate that process so that they're not rushing in here at 5 o'clock. There's going to be a porthole for them to access some day licenses. We changed of a lottery type that they wanted to change it to a lottery type and how they apply for them. Those were some edits. The biggest bone of contention in the meeting was you obtain a resident license
Mhm.
and you decide to move out of the town. That license you now become a non-resident, but they hold their resident status with a resident fee. But if they relinquish that license, it comes back to a resident license. But again, I think that Council Hamill's right. I think as far as that subject matter, Robert Willett or Nate Orff really can speak to that as the crafters of that. I was there, but I would defer to them on the reason. They had some reasons why they wanted to do it, and we'll bring them back. The other things we talked about was 70 and over. We changed some wording in there. We changed some wording on the non-resident 70 and overs. The day licenses, we changed some of the restrictions to the wording in there was the day license. There was a certain number. We increased the number because there wasn't enough and we also increased people that wanted to get a day license, but it was a holiday weekend so that we could give them up to 3 days on that. They buy a license on a Friday and they're here for the weekend. They want to have a day license for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We gave them the ability to do that so they could issue a few days of license if they were here vacationing.
I have a question about day licenses. Can anybody get a day license?
Yep.
Okay.
I've got a
That-
question on the age. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish.
Yep.
No, that was all I want to know. He answered, yeah.
I've got a question on the age. You have a 60 and over and they have a 70 and over. Is there a reason why we just don't have a 60 and over and it applies to 70 and over?
I can't answer that.
Where was
That's a
that?
Robert Willett. What page is that on?
So the 70 and over is,
On
F.
Page 9.
well, no, there's 60 and over earlier in the document and there's 70 and over down below. It looks like we have two. So numbers 4 and 5 speak to, I'm sorry. If you look at A5, there's a resident 60 and over. And if you go down to something F,
Hey, what
What
page?
page are you on?
Sorry.
9 has got the 70 and over.
Yeah.
And 60 and over shows up. It's on page 3.
On page 3, it's 5 over 60 resident commercial bushel
Oh,
license.
commercial bush.
That's the difference
Yeah.
because it's a bushel license versus I think the other one is 70 over recreational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is why.
Different category of license, that's why.
I just want to know why
Yeah.
60 is special and why 70 was special. Like,
I don't,
why not just all above 60?
it's a good question. I'm trying to see. Yeah, see the 70 on page 9, the 70 over resident recreational and the 70 over non-resident recreational. Those are recreational PEC licenses. The 60 and over it basically gives the ability for somebody that's 60 and over to dig that 1 bushel, which is a commercial allocation of clams so that they could sell that 1 bushel a day if they wanted to.
I thought it was 65 and over.
Uh-oh, we're all.
It says 60 in here, Tracy. I don't know. On page
You've
3,
been telling people that they can't get them?
it's on page 3, it says 60 and over.
But on page 9, where it says 70 and over resident recreational licenses,
Page 9.
H, you mean?
on
Yeah.
page 9F, where it says 70 and over recreational licenses.
Yeah, it sounds like this has got to go back for
I
some
think-
more work.
So I think it was to expand the pool of applicants. But it doesn't raise the question if it's over, over 70 is over 60, right? So.
Where do you see it? What page is it on, Tracy?
8. These are,
Okay.
and they, see, D, F, we're all under category A, B, I'm scrolling up here. Section A1, or so EA is commercial renewal licenses. And then B is non-renewal resident commercial and non-resident commercial licenses. C is resident student commercial licenses. They each have their own set of rules. D, non-renewal resident student commercial licenses. E, resident recreational licenses. And they just expanded the category of resident recreational licenses to 70 and over resident recreation licenses.
Hmm.
I wa-
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna
Go ahead.
say, why don't we give this back to whomever and then get Mr. Willett in
Right.
here?
Right.
Because it sounds like there's a few
We can't answer those
inconsistencies,
questions.
right?
Yeah, there's a few, and I'm not
inconsistencies.
sure why they made
Yeah.
those age anomalies.
I can't answer that either. So I suggest, I think what we do is we have Nate Orff and Robert Willett come back and we take another turn.
Yeah.
On the Shellfish Ordinance. But otherwise, we move the coastal waters and harbors forward. So why don't we get a motion to that effect then?
A motion
One
to
more turn.
table the
Yes.
shellfish conservation?
Second?
Any more discussion
No,
before any more questions are asked that we can't answer?
no,
Okay,
Counselor McGee,
Yes.
Counsel Katerina,
yes,
Counsel Hamel.
yes.
Thank you.
And my apologies. I sat through most of the stuff, but. I
That's
can't,
okay.
you know,
No,
it's
no,
one thing
no,
to kind of
no.
go through it when you're surrounded by experts. It's another thing to kind of
Right.
explain it as an expert and I'm a novice. I have to
That's okay.
confess, so thanks. Darren, nice work. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
All on both of these. Thanks very much.
now,
Jamie, thanks for coming and
Sure.
sorry for the short notice, but we know this one has been idling for a while, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you for putting it on the agenda. I'm Jamie Fitch, the Sustainability Coordinator. We have a couple members of our Sustainability Committee here with us tonight this evening to talk about the proposed ordinance for electric vehicle charging stations. So we have the Sustainability Committee's been working on this one for a while, over a year now. The memo in your packet kind of lays out the steps that have been taken by the committee so far, including a stakeholder meeting last December, an initial meeting with this committee in February, a town council workshop in April. And all through the process, the proposed language has been revised based on feedback from all of those multiple groups. Jay Chase, our former planning director, went through this before he left to clean it up a bit and get it into a better form so that it would fit within our zoning ordinance. And I have had an opportunity just briefly to work with Autumn Spear, our new planning director, to go through this. It was just recently, so her comments and suggestions have not been incorporated into this yet. But she did have some really good questions and ways that or things that we need to consider as we work through kind of the finalizing the language. So not a whole lot has changed in terms of what we are proposing for requirements since we spoke with you back in April. But I'm happy to take any questions or get some feedback in terms of moving this forward and next steps.
I have a question. Mr.
Go
Chair.
right ahead.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is because I don't remember and I should know. When
You
we're
got a lot
talking about,
going on.
like, single family residences, what, we're talking about new construction?
We are talking about all new construction,
Yeah.
both residential and commercial.
Okay.
So for residential, we're saying that all houses essentially need to have a 220 outlet
Right.
in their garage so that an EV charging station could be easily installed. And then for commercial development, it varies based on the type of development, what we're looking for requirements. Essentially, I think, for the majority of commercial development, we're looking for 25% of the parking lot to be able to be built out with EV chargers at some point in time. And so we split that out into varying levels of kind of preparedness. So some commercial entities will have to have EV chargers installed for a portion of their spaces. Some will just have to have the conduit and the electrical capacity available. And the remaining balance to make up that 25% of parking would have to just have electrical conduits so that electrical capacity in the charging stations could be installed at a later date. The one exception is lodging establishments. We're proposing that hotels basically design their parking lot so in the future it can be 100% built out with electric vehicle charging stations.
So that's one for each guest room.
One for each guest room. And the memo lays out, and we've talked about this in previous presentations, kind of our justification for this. The majority of car companies have pledged to go all electric within the next 10 to 20 years. There's a lot of things happening on all levels. Locally, our comprehensive plan calls for reducing vehicle measures or emissions, excuse me. On the state level, Maine's climate action plan is calling for more EVs. And then there's lots of money now federally through both the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act to go towards electric vehicle infrastructure. So this is going to kind of accelerate that build out. And there are incentives for developers and homeowners to take advantage to recoup some of the costs. But it's also much cheaper to do it, to plan for EV charging infrastructure during development as opposed to ripping up pavement and trying to do it in the future.
Well, that's why I asked about just anyone listening. So they would be like, what do you mean? I gotta go now? I gotta put 220 in my garage, for a house that, like my house, 150 years old.
Yeah, no, so none of this will be retroactive or anything like that. It's just for new
Yeah, I
construction.
just want to make sure.
And then redevelopment for commercial development.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's more of an observation. So if this were to pass in its current form, you would have a new restaurant or whatever it might be. And you're having a percentage, the parking, it's back to my planning board days, the parking lots are designed based on how many square footage or the patrons or the type of establishment is.
Right.
I think my bigger concern is if you're dictating that X amount of that parking lot needs to be EV, do we actually have enough parking spaces for that establishment for non-EV customers? Because you wouldn't want a non-EV vehicle parking in an EV space. So
Yeah.
my question to the members of this council is, does this actually need to be paired with zoning changes or requirements on the infrastructure? What we're asking our restaurateurs and other businesses to build out in their parking lot, we might actually be asking for more parking spaces in the meantime. How does this impact that aspect of it? So that's my major concern with this, is making sure that we don't have parking lots that are just half full of EV chargers and no one can park in them, because we're not caught up to that point yet.
Right. So just to respond to that, in terms of the restaurant example, most of our restaurants are going to be less than 25,000 square feet. So they won't be required to put in any chargers at this point. They'll just be required to put in the conduit and have electrical capacity for 5% of their spaces to be built out with EV chargers into the future. They'll need conduit for 20% and then capable for basically plug and go for EV chargers for 5% in the future.
Go ahead. Can you?
You want to come to the
He's
mic?
the chair. He's the boss.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that on the commercial side, we were for the most part not requiring people to put them in, and expecting that on the commercial side, business owners will be choosing to put them in as that makes sense for their business model. And so if they only need 3 spots, or if they need 15 spots, they're choosing for their own customers.
And I'm sorry, I should have asked this at the outset. Can you please tell us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Deborah McDonough, Sustainability Committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
So I had a couple of questions. One is, and I think I've asked this previously, but can you tell us sort of, what your references were for bringing this forward, how it originated, how you brought it forward?
So this originated out of the Sustainability Committee. One of our members works for Efficiency Maine and is very familiar with kind of the trends with electric vehicles. And both there's kind of a chicken and an egg thing going on with the topic of electric vehicles. So some people are saying, well, we don't need all these chargers because people aren't driving electric vehicles. And then there are other people saying, well, I would drive an electric vehicle if I knew that there was access to a charger either in my home or where I work or someplace that I frequent on a regular basis. So we kind of are trying to find that balance between the trends are showing us that EVs are going to become more popular. And so we need to start planning for that with as simple as let's get the conduit under our parking lots so that it's really easy to put those EV chargers in once we are seeing a ramp up of the of people using EVs. But we also want to encourage people to start using EVs. And in order to do that, they need to know that they're going to be able to charge. So we need to start installing them throughout the community.
And a follow-up to that, that's really helpful. To, where would this put us? I mean, assuming we approve this and started implementing it, where would this place us in terms of the comparison to other towns in the state of Maine or the region? And where would we be like, you know, head of the class, you know, and if so, we really want to be there or, or at the back of the class. So can you help us with that? I thought you had some sense of.
Yeah, so there are other communities working on ordinances like this. To my knowledge, none have them in place yet. So Portland and South Portland. Portland has it as a requirement as part of their technical manual. So they are, it's not codified in ordinance, but it's kind of referenced through their technical manual. So they've got a little bit more ability to require people or developers to install EVs, but it's not officially part of their ordinance yet.
So what I'd like to suggest is that you mentioned it was reviewed by Jay and Autumn Spears here, our new head of planning and development. I think it would make sense to make sure we incorporate, all of her feedback and input, which you mentioned, we haven't really done yet completely. So I'd suggest we need to do that. Number one, and number two, I don't want to make this a long, drawn out process or a high hurdle, but I think it would be helpful. And I'd look to Nick and Jean Marie for suggestions on this. So how can we get feedback from the folks that are going to have to put these in, developers, what do they think about it? Because I seem also to recall that there was some, at least with the Costco approval, there was a big debate about how many charging stations to put in and how powerful they would be. So I'd like to just hear more about that. I don't know enough about the subject yet to be able to be most informed.
Well, part of me is thinking, if we move this forward to council, because I know having been on sustainability, it's the liaison, this has been out there for a while and they have engaged with stakeholders and whatever. That being said, we know how it all works. Then until people get hit in the face with something, they aren't going to come forward. But if you were to put it out to council, of course, we've got we've got a long process. We've got, first reading, public hearing, second reading. So there's going to be a process for collecting information. So I think if I'm reading you correctly, you're asking, is it ready to do that yet?
Yeah.
I would vote to put it to council.
And we
But
could
I'd
do-
like to hear from Mr.
Okay,
McKee because he's been on planning board for,
I'm on the same with Don, and I'd actually want to hear from our.
Okay.
I am
Well.
concerned about how this interacts with the current zoning. and
Yep.
Parking requirements.
Yep.
for what we have.
okay.
So,
And my preference would be another round at committee before going to the council, just so we have ample opportunity to socialize it. I don't think it's
This
gonna,
committee,
Yes.
not sustainability.
yes,
Us. Okay.
the ordinance committee.
Okay.
Yep.
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 Any comments, Jimmy? I know you're one of the most patient staffers I've come across, so I hope you'll welcome this in the spirit in which it is intended.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I have a-
definitely.
I have another question too.
Sure.
And I'm gonna trust that you maybe have your pulse in the situation a lot more than I would. Do you see a trend here, though, where you might, I've read articles about it, but the idea of like a fueling station, but it's really a battery swap out. Do you see that as a potential for electric vehicles more so than plug-in charging down the road?
I think down the road, but a ways down the road, because batteries aren't standardized right now. So it's going to be a long ways out before all of the manufacturers get on the same page in terms of what batteries they're using, and is there going to be an easy swap out? And Deb,
Debbie.
see, this is why you're here.
Deb McDonough, Sustainability Committee again. Where I'm seeing swap out in the literature is in smaller vehicles. So things like mopeds, things like little bikes and things like that. The cars, for the most part, have the batteries like built into the frame. And you're not going to be looking at rapid swap outs on those unless there are major changes in manufacturing of those vehicles. So the technology does seem to be stabilizing for transportation vehicles on like on car-sized vehicles on plug-in rather than swap out.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And just in terms of the stakeholder process, like I said, we did have a meeting with them. It's available on the town's YouTube channel. If you want to go back and see that. And we did revise the numbers that were in here and revise them down quite a bit from what was initially proposed to them and what is before you today. So we did hear their feedback and tried to incorporate it where we could.
I would make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we return this to Jamie and ask Autumn to weigh in on it and report back to us in the next meeting, our next ordinance meeting.
Very well. And does that cover the questions we raised in terms of getting zoning input? That,
That's the purpose.
But that's why Autumn's gonna weigh in and come back and talk
Very
to
good.
us.
I think,
I'm okay with it going to the next meeting as long as Autumn is finding that she's got the time to put into it. I don't know what her.
Well, that's true too. Of course, I'm
Yeah,
like,
so-
I'm one of these, I like to see a deadline.
I just don't know
so
what
it
her
gets
bandwidth
done.
is, being new to the
So-
job,
Yeah.
and her head might be spinning, but
so I'd say we'll just, whichever meeting is gonna suit her best, whether it's October or a later meeting.
Well, let's say by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Maximum.
Well,
Second
I can
that.
touch base with Autumn too tomorrow and see if she thinks that she'll have
Yeah.
time over the next few weeks to take a look at this again. And I'll let you know as soon as possible when I hear
That'd be
back.
great.
So,
No,
no, it's really,
input from
wa-
the planner.
I want to know how this would interact with the current parking lot and zoning. Like when we require parking spaces to be constructed for a certain type of building or use, I want to know how this would interact with it, and if she has any opinion as to whether or not some of those zoning ordinances might have to be altered. And I'll give you the perfect example of what's in my head right now is None Such River Brewing.
Oh,
where-
yeah.
That's
If
the
they
perfect
put, like-
example for so many parking
Right.
issues.
Well, because if they had like 3 EV chargers in there, I mean, holy
Yeah.
moly, like they're
Yeah.
already tight on parking. So.
Yeah,
I mean, it's-
and again, that one, they're just gonna have to put conduit in. They're not gonna have to put in chargers right now. And so it can be their business decision when they decide they want to put those in.
But that's what I'm thinking in the back of my head is
For sure.
another restaurant that comes in and just does the bare minimum on the parking to meet requirement. And whether or not if those EV chargers really hurt the ability to park on the property itself and we find more people parking on the road. But that's.
Which begs the question,
Mhm.
do we need to increase the amount of parking for some of these restaurants? That's a zoning.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I mentioned that 5 years ago during my term on the planning board.
Yes, you did. I remember. Mhm.
yeah, I think that's also a key question. You're saying, if you look at the opt-out charges, the in lieu fees are pretty steep. So, if you're gonna do something, it seems to me there's a disincentive to opting out. Those really are pretty strong inducements.
That's good.
Yeah. So can you reframe the motion, please? Restate the motion.
Yes, I move that we return this proposed ordinance back to sustainability, and they will require or ask nicely the planner to weigh in, particularly as it relates, I can't even think of this power name, as it relates to zoning.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay,
Council McGee,
Yes.
Council Katarina,
Yes.
Council Hamel.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks-
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. Look forward to seeing you here again soon.
What is in this cough drop? It's like,
This is lemon. Yes.
it's wicked strong. Here, sorry, public, don't mind me.
So with that, I mean, that's actually a great lead into Jean Marie's update on the meeting we had yesterday.
Yeah, just to update folks, and again, this isn't, anything cast in stone at the moment. It was a great meeting with public safety people, the social workers involved at Comfort Inn, the security person from the Comfort Inn, and the attorney for the Comfort Inn's owners. A little bit of brainstorming and asking questions and teasing out what the heck's going on, but the bottom line is that we're going to be working on a phase out of the Comfort Inn being used as a shelter, I guess, for the lack of a better word. I know it's my understanding that the attorneys, the town attorney and the Comfort Inn attorney were talking this morning, and I haven't heard any more about whatever. My request at the meeting yesterday, and Dawn was at the meeting also, was that they come back with something for us to put on the agenda Wednesday, because their licensing is Wednesday. So what we would like to see is, rather than just say, no, that's it, we're yanking the license, what are the options? But to have I hate to say drop dead date, it sounds really bad, but a date certain that it will no longer be a shelter, because the owner has said that they don't want it to be a shelter either. They want to be able to renovate it and return it back to hotel lodging use. So that was the essence of the meeting. My thing is, I would say we stay tuned, see what these parties are working out. Opportunity Alliance is also going to report, and I asked them for demographics, just so we'll know, who we're dealing with. I feel badly personally that, there are going to be people who won't have a roof over their head. It's very hard to find something, but at least we're not saying out now. Does that make sense? So,
Just a quick question. So
Yeah.
do you anticipate some sort of, I don't think we can do temporary licensing, but it's a license subject to,
well, that's
X, Y,
the
and Z.
legal
That's what-
question. That's what
okay.
they're working on.
that's what we'll probably see.
Yes, that's what we're gonna hear about. Because that was my question. Can we do a provisional license or conditional? But that's something the lawyers need to. I can't answer that. So,
It's encouraging.
yes, yeah. And that way, and we want it to be phased, so it's not like all, however many people are over there now are, evicted all at once, because that's a huge cost too.
Well, probably give them time
People-
to help sort the next steps out.
Exactly, and it will help the case managers to say, okay, so we're gonna take 15 and 15 or whatever, okay? So that's what I know at this point.
So this was the second, I think, in a series of meetings that were
Right.
initiated by the Public Safety Department, by Tim Barker and Fire Chief Kendall, and they and their team have
Oh,
done a
yeah.
great job, updating us and keeping us apprised of the issues. So it's pretty clear, nobody's really happy with the current situation.
No.
The property owners not really happy. They don't really want to be in the shelter business and have other plans for the property. The social services folks that have been there, find that it's very uncomfortable. We don't really have our arms around what the need states are and how to best serve them, in any fashion,
Right.
the way this is currently working. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people in the community who are quite uncomfortable with it. And even the attorneys for for the property owner. We're advocating for beginning some sort of orderly process of trying to transition people out of this as a place for temporary housing. So, and you may recall, in the meanwhile, we were kind of looking at what other towns have done, and it's quite clear if we begin to make commitments, that takes us down the road of some significant decisions around costs and other things that we're not sure really is going to help to solve the problem. So that's kind of the current state of play. It was a very productive meeting. I was surprised that there seemed to be consensus around it, but define better what the need states are, set a time frame for an orderly transition to the next phase, whatever that is for everyone involved, and then we just move through it rather than move to 30-day quit notices for people who are all there at one time.
Yeah,
So,
and throw them into total chaos.
Right.
They already live a
Right.
chaotic life. And I don't want to burden them anymore. I wish I had a place for them all to go, I wish we had the old boarding houses, seriously, boarding houses and you move in case management. But we don't have that model.
So that's the
Right
latest.
now.
We're hopeful that this will lead into some, inform in some way, some sort of motion for next Wednesday. So we have people working on that.
Yeah.
But these meetings were really very effective at teasing out the issues and trying to get a
Yeah.
better understanding of what we're dealing with. Very complex problem, deeply seated, and no quick fix, unfortunately.
So that was just an
Thank
update, yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. The other, item we have for business is, John Anderson provided, an outline of, some concepts for potential, work on revisions to the growth management.
John
ordinance.
Clucci. you mean.
I'm sorry, John Clucci, has done that. And I think that, we want to take a minute to sort of talk about those and see. I doubt very much we'll come up with any
Do you have it?
specific recommendation. The one I have is, the one from John Anderson.
Anderson.
I saw something from John in the Google shared drive.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was
Yeah,
pretty simple, just changing the numbers.
right.
Right,
That to
right.
me seemed like
So
the,
that was that one from John Clucci.
that was from Clucci.
And then we have another one from John Anderson that is just, just came in today.
Oh, it did?
So. hang on,
I haven't seen anything
no,
from
hang on,
John Anderson.
hang on.
Of course, I haven't been sitting in front of my computer.
Yeah,
either.
maybe just to me. Okay, I'm way ahead of myself here. So.
You're getting out over your
Yeah, it
skis.
does happen. It does happen. Yes, well. So I think for this point, we're just trying to identify some concepts, some design principles for how we could possibly revise the GMO.
Well, I think it's gonna go. Don't we have a plan for it to go in front of the council? It's not gonna go through ordinance.
I think John Clucci's motion and my name is attached to it. How would that happen? I don't know.
Because you met with them to come up with it, so
Well,
don't
okay, but
lie.
Yeah, I can't very well say that I'm an equal
Welcome to the
sponsor of it.
ordinance committee.
there you go.
We do this in public.
Mhm.
It's an iterative process. I think the general sentiment is that the way that we have currently configured the GMO is that we tried to accommodate some challenges that were presented by the Downs and their need for, the number of permits and timing, with our need to try to manage the overall level of growth in the town. And right now we have a guideline of a rolling 10-year average of 144 units. And it was pretty clear that when we revised the GMO. we
Per
really-
year, right?
per
Annually.
per year.
Yep.
And that when we did the last revision of the GMO, that we probably, we cut that back, quite a ways. There was a feeling that maybe was not enough to let us to achieve and maintain the growth level. We've been exceeding the 144. We haven't really come below that. So that our problem has really been trying to demonstrate to the public that we're tapping the brakes on growth without going too far, number one, and without trying to give
Well, unless we
too
have,
many permits to one particular.
to me, we don't have anything in front of us asking the ordinance committee to do anything. So I would just say hang tight. That's my motion.
Fair enough.
I, just, for what it's worth, I know this was I think this was when, Jim, you might have been on vacation and
Oh, this was
Chairman
summer.
Kalushi was here and we brought GMO up and
Right.
there was talk of trying to take our hand at it and see what we could do. Just so the council and the public knows kind of where my head's at. I think there's a couple of important parts when it comes to the GMO. One of them is you do need, developers need certainty when they're gonna
Right.
deal in the
That's
town.
correct.
So it's part of the reason why I don't love the exemption process is because
Right.
it really, one, creates a lot more work for us, but two, it's really saying like, oh, this is the playing field, but come back and talk to us if you want to change a rule here and there.
Yeah.
Don't love that concept either. So
Right.
I think finding that middle ground is possible. And I think it's doable. I don't think I've seen any language that really gets to it yet. And
I
that's,
haven't seen any
you know,
language.
right?
I got this today from Clucci because he
Mhm.
was talking about it. And I said, well, I haven't seen your language. So he
Right.
sent it to me today. Now I've seen absolutely nothing. You say John Anderson supposedly
We
said
we don't
something?
have some direct, we're just talking.
So what I'm saying is we don't have anything,
There's-
so,
There's no action.
so hang tight.
So this was a discussion item. I think we'll take another pass at it once we get a better idea of design principles. Yeah. Hi, Tom. You wanna speak?
Yeah, I beg your pardon. I'm doing double duty. I'm in a main meeting, but monitoring yours as well. I just thought it may be helpful in a conversation with Chairman Clucci. There will be his proposal on your agenda for consideration next Wednesday.
Oh,
And as Councilor McGee alluded to, essentially that proposal is very kind of surgical. His proposal involves changing two numbers. One would be directly to affect the number requested of the Downs project, 289, with an expiration date, I believe, 3 years out. And the other one would be to change the number of one-bedroom units from currently 70 with an expiration date at the end of this year. I think increase it to 100 with an expiration date about a year and a half out.
2024.
2024, you have it in front of you. Beyond that, I think there is a clear understanding and expectation that a more thorough and comprehensive review is necessary as the ordinance requires. And I expect the council may go so far as to commit itself to going about that work, not unlike what they did last time with GMO. And I think we also did it successfully with the charter review. You kind of self-imposed a process and a timeline, which may well be appropriate in this case as well. But I believe that the spirit of this proposal from Chairman Clucci is to kind of address almost on a stopgap measure, if you will, the request that is currently pending to kind of move past that and to buy some time for a more thorough and thoughtful review.
Great job.
Okay.
So in view of that, I think it probably is not going to be productive for us to just discuss things conceptually, especially if we've got something specific coming in a couple of days. So let's do that. Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Good timing.
That was my motion.
Okay.
You recall.
So
Hang tight.
that's your motion. We don't need to vote on the discussion item, so we'll just take that as, right,
Just a discussion.
we'll just wait to see what we have.
Yeah.
next week.
Yep.
And I have questions about that, but I'm not gonna get into that here. The last item, and this is also just for discussion, is for us to kind of revisit some things we had said we wanted to set out to address at a high level, in this fiscal year, 2022, 2023, and we obviously we devoted a lot of time to growth and development, but not so much from an ordinance committee standpoint, but from a council standpoint. Spent a lot of time on that. In terms of health and safety, I don't know that we've had really a lot of things there other than we did solar arrays was one, that we did
Right.
some work on. And the other two that we really haven't touched on, and we've begun in any way, is talking about financial health, fiscal discipline, and or town services.
I can speak to the financial health,
Thank you.
fiscal discipline,
Thanks. Thanks.
because I happen to see the finance committee is taking up something.
Yeah.
When's their next meeting? Next week? I'm not on finance, so,
I don't know.
and that belongs in that committee,
Fair enough.
so.
Yeah.
And then, what do you mean by priority and performance town services?
That one had to do with us, revisiting revisiting some of the survey work in terms of ranking of services and how well we're addressing.
What's that got to do with the ordinance?
those. I think that one had to do with looking at community services and in scope related to community services. So
But what's that have to do with, because there's a community services advisory committee.
and I don't know that we got very far along on that one in order
Yeah.
to define better what it meant, but I think it meant that we were trying to look at things in terms of how funding takes place with various committees and how, how those things flow. So
But
it
that
actually was
doesn't have
very-
anything to do with ordinances. That's where I'm going with this. That's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with ordinances, so just take it off the list.
Well, it's
Because
pretty
if
far
I
down
hear
the list.
funding, I'm thinking finance.
Right. But even though we have things kind of develop in other committees, ordinances committee like rules and policies where things originate here can go to another committee or they go directly to the
But
council or things
I
come
would
from
disagree.
committee.
I know, but I'm gonna disagree with you on that.
Yeah, well,
Because the other committees, if they come up with something that needs to go into ordinance,
Right.
then it comes over to ordinance.
Right.
I think you got the horse in the, listen. I can't even talk, so
Well,
horse in
once
the
you-
cart, the cart and
once
the
you
horse.
get your
are
grammar
on me.
together, I'll come back with a better explanation and maybe we can have a conversation that you can understand. Okay, so with that,
This is why everybody, they call us the odd couple, but anyway, go ahead.
So we've kind of decided where we're going on fiscal discipline. We're deciding where we're going next, at least in terms of what's coming before the
Yeah.
council. So I
I think
don't
we're
see there's
good for right now.
anything further in terms of what we looked at in the past or what we need to think about in terms of next meeting agenda items.
No, we sent people back with stuff they're gonna have to bring back to
Right.
us, so I think we're good.
Okay, you're good.
And
Nick?
we may have.
Yeah,
if we're
something
gonna
coming
tackle
up.
the GMO, we may have. that.
We may have something come out of that,
Yep.
yeah.
Very
So
good.
we could just sit tight.
Good.
Hang
We can sit
tight,
tight.
hang ten.
So I have a couple of things that I'd like to bring forward at some point. None
Yeah.
of them are quite ready at all, but I'll just give you a sneak peek. Similar to planning ahead with new developments, I think there should be something in town regarding safe drinking water. We do potable or potable, it depends how you pronounce it, but
Potable.
potable. We do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's drinking water. And my concern is as development continues to push out past the highway out into those, the well water is really bad.
It's really good where but no, you're
We're
right.
very
There's a lot of
lucky.
arsenic, there's a lot of radon, whatever when you
Arsenic,
get.
sulfur, yeah.
Wells, yeah, 300 and 400
And,
foot
and I guess
wells.
my larger concern is there an ability for us to place on the developer when they develop the property and sell it to make sure that it's drinkable water? And those
That's a good
systems
question.
cost, $10,000.
Oh, yeah.
And for somebody moving in with a small family and maybe doesn't have those means, it'd be nice if they started off in a home that had the system and they can drink the water safely. Or you
That's-
can run PWD lines all over town. I think that would make a lot of people happy. I just don't see it happening.
No, it's too expensive and if you want to limit growth, you do
Mm.
not want to be
Well,
putting PWD
yeah.
lines all over town. Otherwise, then there goes your,
right, well,
you're
then
limiting
okay.
growth in certain areas. But that being said, I mean, just from my own experience as a professional in real estate, I think that's a great question. Because when I have people buying houses, they get their own water tests, and then if they find it's not potable, they have to mitigate it. That's on resales though,
Right.
because I do mostly resales.
Mhm.
I would be curious if there's any state or federal for new construction,
Mhm.
and if not, yeah, well, what can we do? Because I
Yeah.
agree with you that it's very expensive to
Mhm.
mitigate. It can be a real nightmare for people too.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think, it's clearly a sustainability and environmental question. We have recent issues with with sewage line leak, so there, and just with the number of houses that are being built, particularly in those areas that don't have, access to public water and sewer.
There
that's
aren't
a-
that many houses being built because
So-
we do have a growth.
Can you please let me finish? Thank you. I'll recognize you. We're gonna let you speak again. Thank you.
That'll be like never.
Yeah. So, and what I understood is that, in the past, there was a kind of a rule of thumb that there were no, near-term plans for public water or sewer west of the turnpike. So, and I don't know, if that's changed at all. but-
There's a bond that was passed a long time ago. And I think it's only $2 million in it now. I mean, the authorization to put sewer under the turnpike.
Yeah.
But whoever wants to do it has to prove that it's worth
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But $2 million doesn't buy you anything anymore,
Right.
so. Anyway,
So-
but to go back to your original thought, how can we get that info?
Well, I just looked at it in terms of, it's gotta be part of some ordinance somewhere, just changing it from potable to drinkable. At least upon the creation of the CO.
Yeah,
But, I just think that would. This,
what's the
drinking water is just one of those things, and
Oh, yeah, is
you know.
potable different from drinkable?
I think
I don't
potable you gotta
know.
burn and like, you can boil it out and still use it as
Okay.
cooking, but it's not,
You're
not necessarily what you wanna be consuming.
Okay.
All
Yeah, I
the
don't
time
know.
as
Yeah, I
as
don't know,
drinking.
yeah.
So anyways, I thought it was something that it's been kicking around in my head and I can investigate it some more, but it's something I'd
No,
like to.
you should ask Brian Longstaff.
Longstaff.
Yeah.
So, just building on that a little bit, would that be something that, we would ask another committee to have a position on, or maybe they've got a point of view on it? If it's Conservation Commission, the newly formed Conservation Commission.
No,
Sustainability
that
Committee,
wouldn't be them. If anything, it'd be sustainability, maybe.
They're combined.
Oh, no, they're not. It's pesticide and conservation is combined. Sustainability, they were right here. They're their own.
I would put it
Right.
under health and safety here. I mean, we have health and safety listed here and it's,
Yeah, I can see that type of thing is potentially coming out of ordinance, but I'd want to know more.
Mhm.
And I think Brian may be the person to ask.
I'll
That's
start
just my
there.
opinion. I know I'm not supposed to talk.
Keep talking. Plus, we're gonna run out eventually. I don't know if there's anything further in terms of, next month agenda items. It seems like we'll have enough coming back from, the next round on, Shellfish. We've got
Yep.
another round on, charging stations from Jamie, and then, whatever comes back to us in terms of GMO.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only other thing I don't want to lose sight of is LD 2009. I think we
Yes.
touched on it briefly and
Yes.
then
Which one's that?
that's the state one that says.
ADUs.
Oh, that's
yeah.
2003. That's LD
Oh,
2003.
2003,
That's why I was like. which one?
2000, I don't know which one, 2009.
Yeah, the one with the 18.
2003, thank you.
I dealt with it on the main municipal legislative thing. That's how I know the number.
All right,
Yeah.
So we'll hold some space then for maybe,
Yep.
state related developments that are still unfolding.
And I have, just so you guys will know, I have a meeting in Augusta next week for main municipal
Great.
legislative policy, so I'll be able to.
So why don't, if you allow, why don't we task you then with doing this as part of your legislative update, how was your legislative liaison role, come back and talk to us about state related
Yeah,
changes to
Oh,
those?
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
Good.
I
Uh,
haven't gotten that packet yet, so.
any other comments or questions? If not, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Do you have people wanting to test?
Oh, yeah.
to-
Anyone from the public?
We do not have anyone from the public online.
Thank goodness. Awesome.
Behave yourself.
Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Council McGee,
yes.
Council Katarina.
Yes.
Council Hamel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.